Is this on? It is on. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to this conversation about weaving. I'm Sally Yerkovich. I work at the American Scandinavian Foundation as Director of Educational Exchange and Special Projects, which means that I oversee all of the grants that we give every year. I'm also curator of Nordic Echoes, which is an exhibition that grew out of one of our grant programs. We have a program that supports traditional arts in the upper Midwest in largely Nordic communities. So as we began funding in this area, we discovered many wonderful artists, and we wanted not just the upper Midwest, but the world to know about them. So that was the beginning of our exhibition. And today, we're very fortunate to have 3 of the textile artists from the exhibition with us to talk about their work and how it came to be. This is one of a series of programs that we're having related to the exhibition. We have next week 3 music programs coming up in celebration of Midsummer. We have on Tuesday Danish fiddling music, on Wednesday a film about a Danish-American fiddler and button accordion player. And then on Thursday, we have a number of Swedish fiddlers and other musicians from Minneapolis who are coming to New York to celebrate Midsummer on Friday at the in Battery Park, but will be here Thursday night for a special performance. So we have lots of music coming up. And then in July, we have another panel discussion with a blacksmith, a wood carver, and actually 2 blacksmiths and a wood carver. And on the same day, we have a wood carving, spoon carving workshop. And I think there's 1 place left. So if anyone wants to carve a cooking spoon, sign up quickly. But back to today. So this afternoon, I am joined by Lisa Wiitala, who is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. She is a 4th-generation Finnish-American living in Hancock, Michigan, and she weaves raya and rag rugs as part of an ongoing exploration of her Nordic heritage. She is a teacher as well as a weaver and a writer, and she will talk more about this, but in her 40s, she acquired her grandmother's antique floor loom and learned to weave through studying at Finlandia University and the Finnish-American Folk School. In keeping with her heritage, she focuses on rag rugs and raya rugs, the latter of which she takes her inspiration from the local environment. Lisa went to Finland to study raya weaving with a grant from ASF, and we're very proud to say, and proud to see the wonderful work that she's done as a result of that. Then next is Christine Novotny, who's a textile artist who explores vibrant color relationships through a variety of traditional weaving techniques. Christine is from Grand Marais, Minnesota, way up north near Canada. And her weavings explore not if colors work together, but how they can interact, seeking unexpected color nuance and relationships in woven form. The first time I met Christine, she was an artist in residence at North House Folk School. And I was really taken by the colors of her that she was working with. But she was using, at that point, all natural dyes and had her studio set up so that you could see how the natural, the things from nature, the flax and everything was processed and then woven on a spinning wheel and then eventually became a wonderful textile. Then finally, last but not least, Amber Jensen is from Minneapolis. She's a weaver, a painter, and a teacher who combines traditional techniques with her own bespoke innovations or improvisations. Her goal is to drive new and different stories out of thread and cloth. Amber she grew up in the Midwest, but spent much of her young adulthood immersed in faraway places, from the Pacific Northwest to the Appalachian South. And we'll find out more today about how those areas have had an impact on what she does. So today we're going to start with we're going to have about 40 minutes or so of conversation among all the weavers, and then we'll have the last 10 minutes or so for you to ask questions of them. And I hope, if you haven't already seen it, after the program, you'll go up to see Nordic Echoes. So to start, I thought it would be interesting just to hear from everyone about how they started weaving. What happened first that drew them to this form? So I'm going to toss a coin and decide. Christine, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Christine. My weaving journey started before I was weaving. I went to school at Indiana University, and I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting, and it's my baby. And when I was painting, I was working with a lot of color and trying to create a lot of like atmosphere and dimension in my work. And it was really, really improvisational, and I just kind of would like make a mark and then follow it. And I never really had a plan, which if you know anything about textile arts, especially floor loom weaving, is like not at all how it goes. But I graduated, I had a BFA in that, and then I stopped painting for a while. I just was like making things, and I was putting them away in this flat file, and I wanted to try to do some kind of work that had some different use cases and like stuff that could fold and have dimension, like physical dimension, and really just try a new medium that got me into making art again, because like I said, I had stopped painting. So I took a weaving class at this yarn shop in Minneapolis in the basement, and I wove my first piece and immediately had no idea what had happened. Like there's so many steps and it was very confusing, but I got this really cool looking thing at the end, and I just kept going with it. And like Sally was saying, I really love color. And what I got excited about within weaving was that the color wasn't like it was in painting, where you're actually like physically mixing to create a new color, but you're doing a lot of optical blending. So you're holding multiple yarns together, and there's just a lot to play with in that arena. And I was mostly doing utilitarian work, scarves, blankets, towels, and over the past few years have moved back into doing more of that fine art work, which I was moving away from when I started weaving from my painting. Is that enough? Great.
So both Christine and Amber are full-time weavers, but Lisa is newer to this. So tell us, Lisa, how you came to become a weaver.
Yeah, first off, I don't know if you could tell, I'm not the professional artist, because I'm the one dressed like I'm going to a corporate job interview, right? I'm like, I wish I got the memo, because these two have the artist thing going on, and I'm jealous. So I'm 52, and I've been weaving for less than 6 years. And this all happened because my grandmother was a weaver before me. She wove rag rugs in the 1950s, 1960s, but I never saw her weave. She never showed the loom to me. I just had this knowledge that the rugs on her floors and on our floors were made by her. It wasn't until about 10 years ago, after I moved back home, my grandmother had already passed, and I was starting to research both my family history and my Finnish American heritage. And my dad said one day, you should drive down to the farm and check on Granny's carpet loom, which was in this little log building we called the carpet shack. And so he didn't have to ask me twice. I drove down and I fell in love with it instantly. This is the first time I think I'd ever seen it, as far as I can remember. It's beautiful. It's a 70-year-old two-harness Union 36 loom. I had to have it, took it apart by myself, wasn't sure what I was doing, didn't know how to weave, didn't know how a loom worked, brought it home, set it up in my old childhood bedroom, and it sat there for several years. It was a display piece, but it was safe now. And it was, then when I was 46, I was taking a social dance class in town, and Providence, the instructor, was the fiber arts instructor at the local college. And she said, you should come audit my beginning semester-long weaving class. So that's what I did. I always wanted to learn to weave rag rugs. I wasn't sure how I was going to go about doing that, and now here was my opportunity. So learned to weave, learned how that loom worked, went home while the class was still ongoing. I went home, I warped the loom, made my first rag rug, and it was so exciting. It was so fulfilling. And from there, things have just, one thing's been leading to another. And ultimately, here I am on stage in New York City, which is just, it's life is endlessly strange and intriguing. And if any of you have been thinking you'd like to learn to weave or some new skill and you're thinking, it's too late. You know, I was 46 and now look where I am. And so it's kind of amazing. I'm also really tired. So if I start, your job is to like wrangle us in if we start going off and
Mm-hmm. Well, is this on? Yeah, it is. Sorry, I have a question for you, because you also talked about all of the strips of rags that your grandmother had. Did you get those at the same time as you got the loom, or was that later?
Yeah, so the carpet shack, she clearly had the intention of weaving many more rugs, or at least she was hoarding lots of materials, let's put it that way. People would donate clothes to her, and she had no way of saying no. I mean, it's this free stuff. She has to take it. So she had stacks of cardboard boxes full of old clothing, very cool vintage clothing now, but it's very musty because it's been sitting there for so long. But yeah, so that was all packed away in that shack too. And there was also a second shack behind that was packed with materials. And the cardboard strips that you cut to put as at your header, I have a picture. There was probably 200 of those she had my grandpa cut those for her, keep him busy in the winter. So here are these in this shack as well. And so all that material, lots of rag balls already prepared, were there. So I saw that when I went to get the loom. And then it was another trip later on. Once I learned to weave, I went back and got all that. So I've been slowly trying to incorporate some of that into my weaving, but it's musty. So it needs a wash in hot vinegar. It needs some time in the sun on the line before I'm going to weave with it and certainly present a rug to someone made from this material. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. And Amber, you've had a very different journey from Lisa and Christine. So tell us about it.
Does this work? Okay. Yeah, so I have been a weaver for about 20 some years now. But I like to tell the story that I started with a drawing degree from art school in Minneapolis. And when I graduated, like many artists, we didn't know what to do with ourselves and how to continue to make artwork. And so my plan was there's no accredited actual fiber program in Minneapolis or in the state of Minnesota. So I kind of started looking for apprenticeships, knowing I wanted to be more connected to textiles. And so I ended up moving back home to Milwaukee, where I grew up, and started to learn how to sew from my mom. And my mom, we're Danish, and we're a mix of all Scandinavian things. And but I'm told we come from a long line of master sewists. So she taught me to sew for about 2 years. And then what kind of came out of that was weirdly backpacks. So I started making, it was the early days of Etsy. And so there was this opportunity to start making things and selling them online. And that was enough for me to keep my studio space and for me to carve out a little living for myself. And when one thing led to another, and they kind of like took off. And this was like early internet, so it was well before Instagram or anything like that. And so, sorry, I shake. There it is. So I did that, but like I became so busy from it that I ended up not being able to make art anymore. So I, on a whim, was living out in Eugene, Oregon, and I took a weaving class, not thinking I had any interest in weaving at all. Like I was like, this is slow. There's no way to be creative with this. I just was like convinced it was not for me, but I was like kind of in a place where I needed to immerse myself in something else. And the moment I sat down at the loom, I was hooked. I was like, it was the meditative part of it. It was challenging, and it connected me to history for the first time in something much bigger than myself. And I just loved the tactile nature of it all. And so, and I think I'd been looking all along in my work for belonging, and weaving kind of felt like an avenue to find that. And so what had happened was it led me to, so I started weaving all these overshot patterns, which is these very iconic, if you've ever seen any weaving, you've most likely seen overshot weaving. And so there's these complex kind of fanciful patterns, and I fell in love with them. And it ended up kind of taking me to Western North Carolina, where all those patterns were translated, and outside Asheville in a little town called Marshall, about 800 people, where there were a lot of weavers. And so I spent a decade there learning about it and being around it and immersing myself in that community. But, you know, like so many places, when you move somewhere, it's like you can't actually connect to the people who are from there. Like I was very much a newcomer. So my story was that the best thing happened one day where like I had this studio on an island along the French Broad River in this tiny town. And these women who were locals from the town, like came into my studio, and they were looking at my work, and they were like pointing to it, and they were like they recognized it, but they were really confused. And they were like, wait a minute, like my grandmother like wove those. And it ended up like opening up this huge story of like, they just opened up. It was like it broke the ice. And then they were telling me about their family and their, you know, like siblings and their great grandmothers, and how like the porches, and like how important it just was. Like it fed into their whole life. And it was so moving, because then I got to share my story of how I came to it and why I love it so much. And now I'm weaving in these like oversized, like I'm over like blowing out the patterns and weaving them in like fuchsias and safety orange and all this stuff. And so they were like, it just was like sweet, because they were like, I love this. Like, and I don't know, it really showed me like the power that weaving has to connect us. And so, not to be too long, but then 5 years ago, so the one thing that made me move away from there was the fact that I never was going to be from there. And I have all this Danish heritage. And so I really wanted to come back to the Midwest about 5 years ago now to start kind of investigating what connects me to my own, how does weaving connect me to my own heritage, which is Danish and Norwegian. I think we're everything, Swedish and Finnish. So I came back, and then I met Christine actually at, she came for like an impromptu studio visit, and we hit it off and talked for like 4 hours. And she introduced me to North House Folk School and kind of asked me if I ever thought about teaching. I'd never thought about teaching before, and ended up going up there and teaching, and now I teach a lot. And it's I've been learning so much from that place and Christine and so many other talented people up there about all of the heritage of the Upper Midwest craft.
One of the really interesting things that I learned in the process of putting together the exhibition is that a lot of the Appalachian weaving was inspired by people from Sweden. And I've never thought, that you can see similarities in the patterns, but I'd never really realized that. In the early 20th century, one teacher, I think, from Sweden went to teach at a school in Appalachia, and that just sort of mushroomed into asking more Swedes to come to Appalachia to teach weaving, and made the connections that you don't often see. So that was really cool. So I'm curious about how, now you've moved back to where you grew up, and Christine, you're in Grand Marais, and way north, as is Lisa, in the way north of the Upper Peninsula. How does where you're living now and the environment have an impact on what you're doing? Lisa, do you want to?
Well, yeah, the environment. For one, it means I'm probably not at my loom for about 6 months of the year because our fabulous, brief but lush growing season. I'm a gardener, so I'm unlikely to be weaving if I can be outside in the yard. Midwest, people who are familiar with Finnish Americans, with the Finnish American history, most of the Finns came to what's called the sauna belt or the Finn hook. It's a semicircle, starts in Toronto, Canada. It goes along the North Shore of Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and then along the shoreline in the Upper Peninsula. And that's where most of the Finns came from the mid-1800s to about 1920. So that's why I weave rag rugs. It's because I'm from the Upper Midwest. It's because that's where the Finnish Americans were. I'm Finnish American. If the Finnish Americans gravitate to rag rugs, like coffee, sauna, rag rugs. You think, what are the things that mean the most to the Finnish Americans? It's coffee, sauna, rag rugs. So I'm going to probably just get way off track. Anyway, that's why I weave rag rugs, because the Finns came to the Upper Midwest, and I'm Finnish American, so I gravitate to that. But also, it affects my subject matter, obviously, Upper Midwest. What did I weave for the exhibition? It's thimbleberries. Thimbleberries grow along the Lake Superior shoreline, and they're super popular in the copper country where I'm from. If you're a tourist, you come to the shops in the summer, you're going to look for thimbleberry jam. You can also buy things like thimbleberry soap. You can go to the restaurant and get a thimbleberry margarita. So all my subject matter, I was thinking all the reviews I've woven, only one of them is not something related to something I see in my environment in the Upper Midwest. I have woven several that are the patterns you find in agates, because I love to rockhound along the shoreline of Lake Superior. So I like to weave those patterns. This winter, when it was really cold and I left some wet laundry in my car, I had a frost pattern on my windshield. I took a photo of it. I wove that frost pattern into a review. So, you have to live in the Upper Midwest to be able to do things like that. Anyway, the topics for my reviews all come from my environment. That's definitely, people would say, yeah, that's Upper Midwest. Did I answer your question? Okay, good.
Christine?
How does living in the Upper Midwest? Okay. Great. Yeah, so differently from Amber and Lisa, I am not Scandinavian. I'm German and Czech. When I moved so I grew up in the Chicago area. I moved to Minneapolis, and that's where I learned to weave. And I was just naturally surrounded by a lot of Scandinavian weavers, specifically Swedish ones who, because so many people, Swedes specifically, gravitated toward that area of Minnesota. And so I just, in everything being new, I was like, oh, I guess I'm weaving in the Swedish style now. So that's where my connection to this type of weaving comes from. And living in the Upper Midwest, I work very, very colorfully with a palette that I think a lot of people would look at and say is not naturally derived. It's not earth tones. There's a lot of vibrant colors, a lot of high saturation, mixed with some calmer colors as well. And so I've always kind of struggled with that question, because my work is abstract and then it's really, really colorful. But as someone who makes things because I want to make them and then kind of figures out where the reason I wanted to make it came from after it's done. You know, you look at it and you're like, oh, now I get it. It's totally inspired specifically in the northern Minnesota landscape. I see all of the landscape in it. And maybe it's a way that only my brain would connect to it, but like I do Ria's, which is a knotted pile rug like Lisa makes.
Ria.
Yeah.
Ria is the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm rolling the R on Ria. I shouldn't. Ria. I want to be Finnish and say Ria.
Yeah.
And we can also say Raya. A lot of people say Raya, but we're all talking about the same type of weaving. So
Totally. Yep. And it's like a international, it was just one knot that like everybody everywhere figured out, you know, and there's just different styles of doing it. So if you've seen an oriental pile rug, same thing. It's just the pile sticking out and how much space is between. But I've done wool rias, which is traditional. I've done linen rias. And when I see those like highly, highly textured pieces and then look at what's around me, I'm like, oh, the wool ria, that's like the moss, and the linen ria is like pine needles, you know, so that those connections, whether you see them or not, they make sense to me. I also use a ton of pink in my work and these like really bright fluorescence. It's just a color that I'm always drawn to. I think it makes every piece better. And when I moved to northern Minnesota, it was the first time I was living in Minneapolis before then. And all of a sudden I had this whole horizon that I couldn't ever see before living in an urban area. And I think a lot of people think of pink as this like kind of unnatural color. And now I was seeing entire skylines of it with every sunset and sunrise. And so those things, they just make their way in there. Yeah, so it's landscape derived, but I feel like I kind of come to it through a maze where I'm going in every direction.
That's great. So Amber, you're one of the pieces in the exhibition has an obvious connection to the environment, yes. But I know that inspires your work. The landscape, Midwestern landscape, inspires your work more in a larger sense.
Yeah. So I think that I started realizing what I think I felt like. I grew up in the Midwest and then I left for a really long time. So it wasn't until I returned that I think I started really finding this like reverence for how special it is in the Midwest, and kind of secret, felt like kind of like a hidden secret. And I was like, I'm proud of being from here. It's like, it's really special here and unique. But yeah, and then there's this tangible legacy of being connected to the Nordic countries that you just really feel. And I felt that coming back here too. And so, I really felt drawn to how unique specifically the craft history is in the Midwest, and how like after living in Appalachia, which is like where I think we kind of associate a lot of craft, like the craft history, the Midwest seemed different to me, and in really like a really whimsical way. But it's this mix of the indigenous and the Scandinavian, which I think is just really, and all this water, this magical water. And I think that it's that maritime culture of canoe making and basketry, and then heavyweight weaving with wool, like to keep warm in the cold, and then all this color that we use because we have so much darkness. And so like the piece in the show, one of the pieces I wove with wood and on a wool warp and made this raft. And so I'm really trying to marry these two, all these different historical resources and references with the wood and wool. And so I think that's been like that's where I'm very excited about that work right now and see where it goes.
So Christine and Amber, both of you have wonderfully poetic names for the pieces that you have in our exhibition. I'm curious to know where the names came from. Are they things that you were thinking of while you did your weaving? Were they titles that came to you after the fact? how do they connect with the pieces themselves?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So most of my titles come from my work afterwards because I feel like it's really important. I always say this, like I felt like after I was trained artistically in a really to be a conceptual artist, and that was like 20 some years ago. And I never felt like a real artist, to be honest, in school. I never felt like I could work conceptually. And so I felt like there was a moment in making about 10 years ago when I decided I'm just going to stop thinking about what I'm making, and I'm just going to like trust the medium, and I'm going to just start making lines, and I'm going to start weaving on my loom and see what happens. And then I realized it was overwhelming, like how much it just like tells me what it needs to become. And then there's like so much magic in that to me that I like it just expands. And so I guess in answering the question though, it's like I have a daily practice. So I weave every single day. And so I'm like constantly, and you can only see 6 inches of what you're weaving at a time. And so to me, it's like you have to forget about yesterday, and you can't, and like the unknown of tomorrow. Like you just have to stay in the moment. And so what happens is like my work, when I pull it off the loom, ends up being so weighted in like my real, like the making of my life, as it feels like. So there's just like, oh, that was that day, and that was like I felt really bad that day, and I just like that's weaving reminds me of that, and then it's all like mashed up together. And so I think when I like complete a piece, it ends up feeling like this like chapter of my life that is based on emotions and sort of like these like fantastical stories sort of come out of it for me. And I'm really inspired by like Moomin's series and Tove Jansson, but just like mostly how they told tales through learning and like complex stories of people, but through learning and self-discovery. And so that's kind of how I feel like I see my work. And so my titles are kind of a story, which I can share the story, but I don't know if you want me to go into it. Okay. So it's so that there's a big pink piece with a bunch of fish in it, and then there's a raft that's made of wood and wool that's on that adjacent wall. And so I wove the raft first, and I didn't know it would become a raft because I was like just playing with form. And so the story in my head that came out was that I wanted to make this giant raft that I could, because I was reading Moomin's a lot, and especially about Moomin Papa at sea. And so he was going through this like midlife crisis, which I felt like I was going through too. And like he wanted to take his family to this island and start over and take it on the autumn sea. And so that was kind of my inspiration for it, because I felt like I was on this similar journey in my life. And so the raft takes us out to the sea, and then the other piece is like these fish that are undulating in the like going in a U shape up, and then the piece is all ruched. So I kind of say like I feel like I'm underwater. I find a school of fish above me that are illuminated by the light in the sky. They lead me to the surface, which leads me to the raft, and then the raft takes me to safety and new beginnings. So that's where my title comes from.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Christine?
Oh, that was so beautiful. I haven't heard that story. Yeah, Amber nailed so many of the realities of weaving on a floor loom. Like, you might have a design, but you only see 6 inches of it at a time, and you might be following a cartoon or like a drawing of what you hope to weave. But does anybody ever follow their plan completely? So the unveiling, especially of a really large piece or any piece that ends up going around the front beam of the loom is a big reveal at the end. I remember hearing about there are several weaving studios still in Sweden that do these like incredible huge pieces to order that take like a year to make. And those weavers, when they take them off, will roll them up and they won't look at them for like a few days because they just can't. It's, you know, like how much pressure, especially like client-driven work, to unroll it. So I have an idea of what I'm weaving, and it's usually a design, and it's usually just like, I just want to see this. I want to make it, and I want to see what it looks like. But yeah, like Amber said, weaving is like so documentary in process, because when I was painting, you're taught to like paint all over the canvas because you want the left top side to connect to the bottom right side. And so you're always like considering the piece as a full piece from the beginning. And with weaving, you're like line by line by line by line, and then that disappears. And so there's a lot of trust in it. And then there's also like the days that you just decide to change it. The piece that I have in the show was actually slated for another exhibition that it never made its way to. I was weaving it as I was pregnant, and I was like, I got tons of time. And then our baby came a month early, and so I didn't finish it and didn't make it to that show. And so the beginning 3/4 of it was woven when I was pregnant. The last quarter of it was woven with Eve on me. And if you've seen the piece, it has a lot of vertical lines. It's kind of quadranted. And right at the end, I make all of the lines move to the right, which wasn't in my design. I did it, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to look, but it's the last 4 inches, so got to get wild. And I took it off, and I was just like, wow, that's it. You know, like look at this plan that I had, where I had like every week before my birth planned out, and I'm going to fit it all in. And then life just happens, and you go a totally different direction. And the piece was finished. And everyone, when they see it, says like, I love when all the lines move. You know, that became the most compelling part of the piece. I had this quote in my head from when I went out to Sweden. I got an ASF grant, and I went out and learned the technique that I used in the piece that's in the show. It's called Relaken tapestry weaving. And I was out there with Ulla Parkdell, who's the woman I studied with. She's this 83-year-old incredible weaver, just like full of so much zest in life. And she had a gallery on her fridge, which was just like those tiny little magnets that you can get from any museum that you go to that has a piece from the museum. And she had this one that was in Swedish and translated. It says, roses in a broken vase are still always roses. And that like really, I just loved that. And it really stuck with me. And I took a picture of it, and I was like always ruminating on it. And I had it in my head as I was weaving, and I didn't know why at the time. And now looking back at the story of that piece and this like chaotic birth that isn't the way I wanted it to go. And then at the end, it's okay. You know, like there's still always roses. So yeah, the concept just, it comes, I don't think to everyone, but for me, it's definitely after.
So Lisa, do you have the same feelings about your rugs when you weave them and when they come off the loom? Is it a surprise?
The rag rugs?
Mm-hmm. Or either one, or the rag rug?
Well, I guess I'm thinking more rag rugs right now. I've heard it said before, it's like Christmas Day when it's time to unroll the rag rug. I always run in the kitchen and I put it on the table, across the table, and then I stand on a chair and I look at it. And it's always, oh, that's cool. Or is it cool? Or don't I like it? There's always the doubtful voice, and there's the voice that's cheering you on. Yeah. With the ruse, and here's something I keep reminding myself here today. When I was asked to do this, I thought panel discussion. Oh, what's a panel discussion? Do I belong there? So I Googled panel discussion, and it said, it's a group of experts. No, okay, yes, no. Or individuals with diverse perspectives, right? Coming together to discuss a topic in front of an audience. So I keep thinking to myself, diverse perspective. perspective. So I always think that to yourself when you're not sure if you should. You're a diverse perspective. Yeah. I just feel like my answers aren't going to quite be the professional artist's answers. But
that's why you're here.
I know, that's it, diverse perspective. So, your question, right? How do you feel when that comes off the loom? Yeah.
So the thimbleberry and
yeah. Well, those were small, so I could see the whole surface as I was weaving those. Yeah. Yeah. Go on.
So those were made with yarn that you got from Finland. And can you talk a little bit about why that was the case and connect it maybe to your to the work that you did when you were in Finland?
Yeah. They were partially made with yarn from Taito, Pirkanmaa in Finland, which it's a specialty. It's just exclusively Oru yarn, which is hard to find in this world because it's a niche market. So when I was in Finland, I worked with Ulla Karsikis. She was a master Ruju weaver, and she's the one who introduced me to the Taito yarn. And I got to go to the Taito shops, and I had my little Taito shopping bag walking around Helsinki. It was very exciting. But of all the yarn I've worked with, it is by far superior. And so when I came back to the States, then it was, how do you find this? They don't sell it in the States, but I've managed to connect with Taito, so they will mail it to me. So yes, I use that and with the thimbleberries.
If you look at the pieces in the exhibition, it's really the colors, the variation in the colors. It's really wonderful and very subtle.
They have a fabulous color palette, and I think it's 130 different colors, which is extraordinary for that type of very specific type of yarn to try and find somewhere. Which Ruju weaving isn't all that popular in the United States. That's one of the reasons that I got to go to Finland, so I can be teaching it to others. But it is still quite popular in Finland. It's been called the national textile of Finland. So people living there are very familiar with it, and therefore you have a company in Finland that can still make a go of making the specialty yarn. It sells well enough. Not necessarily United States. Yeah.
So, okay. So do you think about the connection between your work and Nordic traditions? I mean, obviously, Lisa, you do, because you're very connected to your traditional heritage.
Yeah. All 8 of my great-grandparents came from Finland, so I'm a purebred. I'm 100%. Had my DNA tested as the day it came in. I'm like, yes, you could. And then it's like, wait, am I a snob, right? Because my cousin got hers back, and it was 99% Finnish, and she was so upset about that 1%. And I thought to myself, I kind of chuckled, but I also thought, I'd be really upset too. It's really cool to be 3rd generation and still have. And then you think, well, okay, though at the same time, well, anyway, it's because so many Finnish Americans came to where I'm from, that's how that ends up happening in the United States. But where I live, Hancock, Michigan, is really Finnish American Central. We have the Heritage Center and the folk school, and so it's What was your original question?
It's that.
Okay.
So Amber, you've talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So
My answer to that question, I think, is that I'm really interested in, as like an American who doesn't know that much about my heritage. It's sadly, I wish I knew more, but it's these invisible connections that I have to my Nordic heritage that are really inspiring in my work, because people will tell me all the time, they'll say, your work looks so Scandinavian. And I'll be like, really? Like, even though I have never really spent much time there and I have no family stories of us being connected to there. So there's this like mystery around it that it makes me wonder, like what maybe is in us, and like maybe there is this legacy of like making, like, all I would love to know is like, were there any weavers in my family way back? And many people have told me, of course, yes, because funny, someone said that weaving in Denmark was, I think, like a punishment to rag rug weave. Like if you had to, like if you were naughty, you had to do the weaving or something. So they were like, of course, everyone, you definitely have ancestors that wove. So it's like, okay, well, that's different than how I do it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm choosing to do it. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know why. I guess it's a chore. It's a chore to weave a rug, but not to me. But the other thing I wanted to say about that is that, yeah, I'm really interested actually now, though, in pursuing that more and going and studying in Denmark and maybe Norway, Sweden, too, to kind of start meeting with artists and craftspeople and weavers, just like craftspeople in general, because I'm just really interested in learning more about that and how that it like I feel like I'll have many revelations about like how it maybe is embedded in me.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because in both in having, working on this grant program for ASF and in developing the exhibition, one of the things that was very difficult to find were traditions in the U.S. that had their roots in Denmark. There are lots of musical traditions, but material traditions were just not there. I'm sure they are there, but people don't connect with them in the same ways. So it will be interesting to see what you find.
Yeah, and the people I have connected with so far there now, because I've just been writing a bunch of people in Denmark, and they keep telling me how much I'm going to be inspired by the contemporary approach to it more than the history of it. So it'll be interesting. But like you cross right over into Malmö, Sweden, which you can, I guess, take a bus even to or something. And it's very quick. And how it's a completely different environment there, and the heritage, the like ancestry of it is more. It's coming from a completely different place. So I feel like there might be an interesting comparison there.
No, it's very true. I think that in traveling in Denmark and asking people about traditions, they said, no, it's contemporary. Yeah. But in looking at contemporary things, you can see some of the connections.
I think that's what I'm actually more interested in, too, I'm realizing. So, yeah.
No, it should be a fascinating experience. Yeah. So, Christine, you're not connected to Nordic things, but yeah.
Yeah, not Scandinavian. Like wear a hat that says that up here. But like I said, it's the weaving tradition that I came into, and I've been lucky to go over to Scandinavia twice now. And my first trip, I was in Sweden. I went up to Trondheim in Norway to look at the work of Hanna Riggen, who's this really incredible humanist, anti-fascist tapestry weaver. They had a big exhibition of her work happening there, and went to Denmark. Yeah, and it's like very contemporary there. What I am really drawn to, I said I went to art school, and at least my experience is not very. It's all about concept. It's concept and it's technique, but like the technique is meant to execute your concept. And that's kind of the most important thing to do it. And so what I've really loved about weaving is that it is really, really connected to these very cherished traditions. And when I tell people I'm a weaver in the US, they're like, what is that? Like what, I get knitted stuff and woven stuff. People are confusing it all the time. Like people just don't have that kind of like material intelligence here. Not everyone. And it was so interesting traveling around in Sweden and in different parts of Scandinavia where if you tell people you're a weaver there, they're like, boring. Like that's what my grandma does. And they have this like very, very clear idea of like, yeah. That's where like all of the linens in our cabinet are like woven by my grandmother and her great grandmother, and I have hand woven things everywhere. And so the younger weavers that I was talking to there are like, who want to do really contemporary stuff, they want to, move away from tradition. And I'm in the US and I'm like, I'm here to learn the tradition. And so having that kind of root in something in whatever way you choose to go, I've gained a lot of value in that and how it informs my work.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually a perfect ending for our conversation and opening up to questions from the audience, because in some ways that point, sort of the being rooted in tradition, but moving beyond it, is part of the point of Nordic Echoes, to show how the traditions can remain vibrant and relevant today, and not boring. So anyway, thank you. So now, are there questions from those of you who are here for those three wonderful weavers, textile artists, whatever? Whoever, I can't see. So, way back in the back. Great.
I just about your last, like you were talking about how the varied reaction that's taught in well, and I know what you need. Oh, this antiquated thing. And, kind of thinking about that and, you like industrial evolution, that is something that was less than artisan. He were less artisan was okay to like factory produce not that scale. And then kind of wondering that artistry and how a lot of people every thing just not that thing rather than art. And you kind of get that history of how this up your life.
Yeah, here definitely. I mean, because we have, as immigrants to the United States, I have a broken history, like all of my family does. All of the people who have immigrated in some way have a broken history. And I think that's why a lot of the Scandinavian and the upper Midwest, those traditions, some of them have been preserved so well because people like brought their looms over and are still working on them today. But yeah, there have been all of these craft revivals. Like one was in the 1920s when overshot coverlets and everything were really big again. And then like the 1880s. And I think we're kind of in another one again right now where people are really excited about it. But yeah, it's like people don't even know what to get excited about because they don't have any connection to a past that like utilized it so strongly.
Other questions?
I have a
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest exception that you have about and or kind of was
Quickly. So the only time I've really sold rag rugs was at there's this festival called FinVest USA that is in Duluth now every year. And so I made this huge batch of rag rugs. And it was fascinating because I thought the rugs that would sell right away, like sold at the end. And like my least favorite rug was one of the first to sell, which shows you just how unique human beings are, which was great. But even at this national festival that attracts Finnish Americans from all over the country, people didn't want to spend $80 on a rag rug. And it's because they can go to a store and buy something similar that's mass produced, and they can get it for maybe $15, $20. So if I'm offering a rug that's homemade by me for $80, which maybe makes me $8 an hour for my labor, that's not a living wage. So yeah, that's one example.
I would echo that. And that the biggest misconception is the amount of time it takes and the amount of labor that goes into warping the loom, like can take you, I mean, depends on how you want to do it, but just like getting the loom prepared is quite an undertaking and requires, and I also think it's the amount of patience that it requires too, and that it, but as I think, I don't know if you teach, we both teach, but like it's interesting when you teach because I think what happens is that it becomes revealed really quickly how much time goes into it. But then what's really neat about it is how like even just a demo weaving, if I go into like a gallery or something and you have people sit down at the loom, the meditative quality, the way that they like change, their whole brain changes. Like I watch them go inward and then they like come out and they're like, thank you. Like I needed that. And like, so it's a lot of time, but I also say that I think that it gives people a little bit of, when they do it, a little clarity on like this broader thing about time, and like slow time is okay maybe. And like, maybe we should all slow down a little bit.
No, that's yeah, it's the disconnect that they don't understand often the time that goes into from beginning to end making a rug by hand.
Yeah, it's now like I think that's why like weaving is sort of having this renaissance, I like to say, because I feel like people are starting to, maybe it's a pandemic thing, but like I just think people want to work with their hands and they want to slow down, and it does a lot for you. And so it feels like a really neat thing to be able to teach people that, and to be like, we're all like a little community of people who are on the same wave.
Yeah, we get it.
Yeah, and getting away from staring at a screen all day long too. And that's what I found in Finland, talking to an organization that basically teaches women household skills, that they're a membership organization, and at a time when membership organizations are having a really hard time, they're thriving because a lot of young women who are glued to a computer screen all day want an opportunity to learn how to sew or to cook or to do other crafts that can contribute to their lives. So I think that's the case, but it's certainly also the case that people don't understand the amount of time that all of these things take. I mean, the skin blanket that's in the exhibition took, I think, 15 months to create. It has a very elaborate weaving on it, and then had to be sewn to a buffalo hide. So it's a major project. And as a result, if you think about that in terms of, what would it cost if you were going to buy it? How much would someone pay for something like that? 15 months of someone's life goes into it. So it's a lot. And same with the Hardanger fiddle that's in the exhibition, which, again, took months to create. So it's all of this is underestimated, I think. So if there aren't any other questions, then I'll just invite you all to go see Nordic Echoes or to come up and meet the artists in person. And thank you very much for coming this afternoon.